and welcome to the Sharepoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group biweekly meeting. It is April 27th, 2017. Welcome everybody to this week's call. Got some great demos this week, some exciting stuff to talk about, some neat updates, and we'll jump right into that. But real quick, a review for folks that might be new to the call or listening to these recordings for the first time. So we are part of the larger Sharepoint Patterns and Practices program. And as the program grew, we saw the need to sort of have a more focused channel for certain technologies. And one of those was client-side development. And with the coming up of the Sharepoint framework before it was released, we needed a way to start to talk to folks about client-side development and start to sort of highlight that to a lot of Sharepoint developers who might have been more managed code focused in the past. And so we started the special interest group for client-side development. There's now one for PowerShell as well as the core component. So attend as many as you'd like. Thank you for attending this call today, but you're certainly welcome to attend as many of the special interest group calls as you want, as well as the monthly call. But we wanted a more focused forum. And so what we do here on these calls is talk a lot about the Sharepoint framework, what's new with the Sharepoint framework, updates to the framework, plan things, and general client-side development patterns and just sort of client-side development stuff. Right, I'll use the word stuff. So big topic there. The second big topic is we talk about the JavaScript core component for the patterns and practices. That's something we've developed in conjunction with the community. So had a lot of great folks help out on that. And sort of the third part of the call we always talk about, but isn't necessarily right on this slide as a bullet point, is this call is also a great place to provide us feedback on what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see improved, things like that. So always listening to that community feedback, and that feedback drives really a lot of what we do in the entire Patterns and Practices program. Two links there at the bottom. The first one is to the SPFx community, and that will take you to the Microsoft Tech community for all things Microsoft, but specifically there's a SharePoint area in there, and that's a great place to sort of ask your questions or have conversations with other folks out there in the community. dev.office.com/SharePoint is your one-stop shop for all things SharePoint development. So whether you are new to SharePoint framework and want to get into that, there's great links and tutorials there. If you're doing provider-hosted or SharePoint-hosted add-in development, or if you're doing managed code like classic WSP deployed, you might still be on premises, for example. All that is now covered at dev.office.com/SharePoint, and I would encourage you to check that out for all your development needs. So moving on, what's our agenda specifically for this week? We got quick updates on the JavaScript core component, some great updates around the SharePoint framework, and we've got two really cool demos. The first one, Vesa is going to do a demo on a Visual Studio SharePoint framework extension. This is built on work from the community, so really cool to see, and it's bringing sort of a more GUI-based experience to Visual Studio. So you're used to maybe like file new project and you might create a new provider hosted add-in project. This is working to bring a similar experience for SharePoint frameworks. You would do file new SharePoint framework project and you would configure it there. But Vesa is going to show that off, very cool. And then Sebastian's got a really cool demo around SharePoint framework with Riot.js. So Riot.js is another framework you could build in, and it's one I personally don't know a ton about, so I'm excited to see what he's come up with there, so that should be really neat. And then as well, we'll hopefully have time at the end for an open discussion on topics that interest you guys. Quickly, how to opportunities to participate in this special interest group. Demo a SharePoint framework web part or anything related to client-side development. So keep encouraging that. Want to provide folks out there in the community a great platform. So if you're doing cool work, please do demo these things out to us. Let us know. We'd love to get you on here, give you a forum. So that could be a SharePoint framework web part. That could be something around the JavaScript core library. That could be just something client-side SharePoint development related. We've had a couple great demos on just using JS Link and things like that the last couple weeks. Contribute on GitHub, get involved, and then lastly, provide feedback. Like I said, everything we do is really driven by feedback from you guys in the community. So we really want to hear from you both positive. We love to hear positive feedback, but also if you've got things that we could be doing a little bit better or things that would help you out in your job, please just let us know. So a quick update here on the JavaScript core library. We released 2.0.4, so that was released out of band, but that was to fix a blocking bug with Sharepoint framework, so obviously that's important enough. We wanted to get a release out for that. So I've been talking in the past about the next release will be 2.04. Well, now the next release will just be 2.05. No big change there, but did want to highlight that. So if you are having trouble in Sharepoint framework, please do pick up the latest release. Should be all fixed there. And do want to apologize. I'm honestly not sure how that bug got out because I swear I tested it, but thank you to the folks in the community that found that and reported it, and actually that was fixed by someone in the community, so thank you for that, and we got that release out, so please do check that out. Feedback continues to drive updates. Like I said, if you follow the issues list at all, we get a lot of the new features are suggested by folks in the community, so if you have something you'd like to see, please do let us know, and we'll see if we can work it in. I can't guarantee it'll get in right away, but we'll do our best. Just a reminder, we are doing beta releases now, so that's a great way to see kind of the stuff that's been developed and merged into the dev branch, but is not yet part of a major release. So we're doing those pretty consistently. When a new feature gets merged in, we'll do a beta release. So check those out, and I do try and track in the issues list. So for a given issue, I'll say it'll be available in beta whatever number, right? Pardon me. Great conversation on Graph. Thanks everybody that's contributed to that thread for the thoughts. Definitely welcome more thoughts from folks out there in the community. So again, taking that feedback from everybody. I think we've got a great base. Like I said, more thoughts, more ideas are absolutely welcome. And I think it's starting to help at least crystallize my thinking on it. So I think that's great, and let's continue moving forward. Like I said, more voices are welcome, and then we will take a look at maybe how to move forward on that. Try and start to make some long-range planning around our graph capabilities. Just a reminder, please check out the wiki and the developer guide. I keep getting asked, why don't we have any documentation? And I'll be the first to say our documentation is not perfect, but we do have documentation, so please check it out. And if you have a specific question that isn't covered, let us know. Way I've been handling that is taking the if somebody asks a question and we don't have a wiki article about it, I'll write up a wiki article and post it there as the answer to that question. That way other folks can get the answer easily. And of course, contributions are welcome in the wiki as well. So we did in the beta, there's some search improvements, so the latest beta if you want to check that out. So some search improvements, there's some support for paging, and as well as a lot more interfaces to help type the search results that are coming back, give you a little bit more information about what's actually there. And we did actually also, as part of 2.04, it snuck out as part of that release, there was a fix for, there's a batch ordering, so the execute promise was resolving before the sub promises, which is obviously the wrong order, not what we intended. So that's actually fixed in 2.04. And as part of that, we've been adding tests to cover these things. So if we do break it in the future, we'll catch it with tests. So trying to do more of that, trying to be better about writing tests. And then of course, help writing tests, again, is another area you can help contribute. Always welcome there. Our test coverage, like our documentation coverage, not at 100%, but working to make it better as we go. We did also update the generic React Sharepoint framework sample to the latest Sharepoint framework release code. So there is some reports that it did not work with the SPFx JS library, as well as a couple others. And so that's fixed now. So if you pull that sample back down, you should be all set to use it with the SPFx JS or many other libraries out there. So that was just a quick update to the latest stuff. And then just a reminder, please do report issues to the issues list. In the last few weeks, we've had a couple people who've posted stuff in communities and places like that. And I apologize, but it's a lot of streams to try and track, so stuff gets missed. But if you get it in the issues list, we definitely won't miss it. We'll definitely see it. So apologies to the folks that responses were a little bit delayed getting there, but so issues list, definitely, if you have an issue, please drop it in there. And also a reminder, please do provide us enough details to understand the issue. Things like item added failed is really hard for us to help you. So 2 links down there at the bottom, again to the community, and again that's the Gitter channel, Gitter page for the PNP.js core, and do check those out. Do be part of the conversation. Love to hear from folks. Love to get the feedback. If you have time at the end, can you summarize the graph conversation? So real quick, I won't take a ton of time on this. There's an issues thread in there on what we're thinking, but the general thinking is, so we have like pnp.sp and then dot coverage for the Sharepoint API, doing something similar for graph, which is something I support. I think we all support. It's just figuring out the best way to do it and not duplicating a ton of work. There's going to be some graph support coming in Sharepoint Framework, and so I'm kind of waiting to see what shape that takes and how we can leverage that, because that'll take care of a lot of the auth. But then we also have the situation if you're trying to use the JavaScript core library outside of Sharepoint Framework. So for example, in like an Electron app, just as an example, it would be really cool if we handled the auth and folks could just use the library there seamlessly as well. So no hard decisions, but like I said, I think we're starting to get some good ideas together, and would love to hear other folks' ideas in that issue. There's a conversation going in that issue, so do check that out. So Sharepoint Framework updates. Vesa.
Let me unmute myself. So a few updates on the Sharepoint framework side and the resources on that side as well. Now that I'm back in call, I think last time I was actually on family vacation. So not a massive amount of actions because obviously we GA'd. There was a GA back in mid-February. There has been actually an updated package after that, which we would encourage the people to actually start using. It is containing some fixes related on, for example, Office UI Fabric integration and how they work together. From a guidance perspective, there's the new guidance which was released earlier this week, which is a debugging solutions with Visual Studio Code with an F5 support and all of that, which is pretty nice setup. So you can actually easily do development in Visual Studio Code just by doing an F5 and putting a breakpoints in your code. Then there has been updates on the existing documents. For example, the localization story and the property bin validation guidance has been updated to match the GA version. We're kind of still slipping slightly behind of updating all of our documentation to the GA, but that's going to happen pretty soon. So we will have all of this updated properly. And obviously, if there's any issues within the guidance in the devdevops.com/SharePoint, please do submit an issue, ping us in tech community and whatever, because that way we will know that we need to fix the documentation as well. Or even better, if you know how to fix it, you can always write a pull request and submit a pull request against the repo as well. On the video side, so I'm going to actually move forward on this one. So there's 2 new webcasts since our last meetup. I think these are both new after that, which are what should SharePoint administrators know about SharePoint framework. So this is more for architects and SharePoint administrators, kind of a considerations on the fact that, okay, now that we're planning to deploy our SharePoint framework solution, what does it actually mean? What are the considerations and all of that? And also comparison between SharePoint framework from an admin perspective between the different other options like add-ins and sandbox solutions and all of that. And then there's a SharePoint framework and organizational considerations, which is more around how do we create these solutions, how do we get requirements, what we should be thinking around the requirements and all of that. And both of these are available in the devdevops.com/blogs or in our YouTube channel as a discussion. And both of them are with me and Waldek. Yes, both of them are with me and Waldek having that discussion. Good. Moving on things, and one point before I actually move on. So if there's any suggestions related on, hey, this is what I would like to see, this is guidance was missing, please let us know. We absolutely want to address any open questions, any open issues, any open topics. We can do videos, we can do guidance, we can do documentations and all of that. So we just need to know what you need to be successful within the SharePoint framework implementation, except time and time to learn the new stuff, which is kind of given. That's understandable. On the kind of a new stuff, which is bubbling under and coming pretty soon. So this is something super exciting, which is actually coming from a work what Erik Chaps and Paul Scheffelin, well, mainly Erik for coding and Paul for helping on the documentation side, helping on making the SharePoint framework more easily integrated with Visual Studio 2015 or 2017. And I'm going to show this one in practice as well. But this is really super early at this point. So we need to still wait for a while to make all of the stuff fully integrated and fully, well, it is already working, but it can always be better. But because the Visual Studio organization decided that they're not going to play with us that well, we kind of are moving on this direction. So we're going to work together with community. We from SharePoint Engineering, we're going to work together with community and build this kind of a tooling, which will then help adapting SharePoint framework also using classic Visual Studio 2015 or 2017. If you do AKMS, SPFx VS extension, that's the easiest URL to remember on this one. That will redirect you to the repo where the code is. There is already an early alpha release available, so you can actually play around. And then there's documentation in the wiki section, which requires still some polishing and all of that, but that's kind of given. But Erik and Paul has done an awesome job around this one. I'm not actually I haven't checked the participant people, but I don't think either one of the guys are in the call. Maybe Erik is in the call. I can see Erik Young. Okay, not Erik Chops. Okay, anyway. So this is an early thing. I'm going to show that one in a practice after a next slide. So quick summary on to what the SharePoint engineering or the Splat team, which is responsible of the SharePoint framework. So what are we right now working on? Obviously, we haven't actually changed the slide too much since last time we went this through, but we're looking into having new capabilities on web part connections, so sending events across the web parts, and it might be that in the first phase it's only based on code, and then in the future phases it will be a UI capability. We're looking into having modern UI extensions, so essentially modern JS link and user custom actions. We absolutely are aware that these have to be there for modern sites and also for classic sites, and they are in the development. And these will then bring additional Yeoman templates as well. There's improvements for the workbench, which are in the queue as well, and then general improvements in the SharePoint framework, and also numerous other topics for both online and on-premises. On the on-premises side, we've been pretty vocal and open on that one. We're looking to release SharePoint framework in on-premises during this calendar year, and that is absolutely our intention still, our intention. And that's going to be SharePoint 2016, not SharePoint 2013 at least first, and then depending on our input and depending on a demand, these things might actually change at some point. Good. Other stuff, SharePoint documentation, and I would ask people to please mute yourself. There's quite a lot of background noise because somebody seemed to have dropped their phone. I can't even find the person who I need to mute. So on the other topics, thank you. Thanks, Patrick. So on the other topics, we are looking into consolidating the SharePoint documentation because right now the SharePoint documentation is partly in MSDN, partly in multiple MSDN locations, partly in dev.office.com/SharePoint and all of that. So eventually all of the SharePoint documentation will be in the docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. So MSDN will actually going to go away. And that's because of the MSDN platform is super old. and it's super hard. It requires a PhD level training to actually get anything updated there. And that's probably one of the reasons why some of the material in MSDN isn't quite up to date. And we want to fix that. And that's the reason why we will consolidate all of the SharePoint documentation to the docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. Before we go there, unfortunately, there are certain challenges which we need to tackle. So all of the active development documentation will be moved to dev.docs.com/SharePoint and then eventually to docs.microsoft.com/SharePoint. And I do know we understand that it's a pity that there will be two jumps, but it is just something what we need to do, unfortunately. Good. Moving on things. So what I wanted to quickly do is show the Visual Studio 2015 extension. There we go. I've been having a pretty busy day today, so I missed the one number over there. So let me share my screen, and I want to show this one in practice. Where is it? How does it actually work right now as an alpha version? And so you can actually understand the behavior. Yes, Visual Studio 205. But let's start sharing, and somebody can actually confirm that you're just sharing.
I got it.
On your side as well. Or Patrick can Excellent. If you got it in the middle of nowhere, and probably many of the other people got it as well. Good. So this is the location. If you go, the easiest way to remember this, AKMS SPFx VX extension is the URL. So I'm going to actually zoom in there. And that's actually redirecting directly to the repo. So if I'm hitting an enter, it's going to redirect to the right repo in the SharePoint organization. And this one has the code. If you scroll down here, there is Getting Started Guide, which is actually in the wiki of this repo, which is actually having screenshots and what do you need to do and how do you actually get started on things and how things actually work. I'm going to show that one in practice in a second. One of the great benefits out of this one is that this is actually still using the Yeoman. What it means is that whenever we, as in SharePoint Engineering, will release a new version, you will still update that and get the updated version from the NPM, but then the Visual Studio extension is taking advantage of the latest installed version. And then maybe what I was supposed to actually show here. If you want to test this one at this point, you can already download a release. This is early alpha version of the extension. 9 days ago, Paul actually packaged a one version. There will be an update coming, I think, early next week and then following week, and we will do a webcast and a video recording and everything else with Paul and Eric pretty soon. But this is pretty early stuff, but you can have a look on how does it actually work and what does it actually mean. But let's have a look on that. So when you have installed the extension, what it means is that if I start creating a project in my Visual Studio, underneath the Visual Studio C#, I can see Office SharePoint, and underneath there I can see SharePoint Framework and SPFx Web Part Project. So let's actually do this. I'm going to put that one in a random location. Let's call this PMP JS SIG demo. So I'm going to copy that and create the project. What it actually does is that it starts this wizard, which is then requesting the needed information to provision essentially the structure for the SharePoint Framework solution. So let's keep the solution name the same. We can do framework none or the typical selection as we have in the Yeoman templates for SharePoint Framework. Let's call this Hello World. Doesn't really matter. Hello World from SIG. And this is going to be cool web part for us to play with. And what actually happens here, I can click the generate, which is fine, or I can go to the advanced tab and actually see what's actually happening and what are we executing. So what the wizard is doing, it is actually executing the Yeoman template commands. But it's hiding that behind of the scenes. So as a developer, you don't necessarily need to go to the command line. Well, technically, every now and then you will need to go there, and it's good to learn that, but this will make hide the command line and command window from you. In this particular case, I'm going to actually add one more switch here because creating the solution does take a while because we're pulling down all of the npm packages to the node modules folder. So I'm going to do here skip install, which means that it's not actually going to do npm install command after scaffolding of the project. And then I can run click generate, and what's going to happen is that the solution is now doing the actual scaffolding. There was an option for me to also show the command line window, so it would actually show me the command line window as it's executing what's actually happening. But creating the initial structure without the installation doesn't take too long. And we will get that available in a second, unless my Visual Studio just crashed. Let's see, it is in a not responding status. And if I would only be able to blame hardware in this case, that would be good. That shouldn't take too long. And I do have a pre-configured solution already waiting on the side. It's still actually creating that, creating project. But while it's doing that, I can actually flip on the other side as well. So I created this solution before, and what you get is a basic Visual Studio solution structure, which is obviously looking exactly like the typical structure when we run the Yeoman template as well. So you'll find the configs, the source folder, and all of the other typical folders here, and you're able to play with the files as well. What's cool around this one is that the templating or the extension also adds additional capabilities. So I can actually add a new item, and I can say add Office SharePoint, and there's our SharePoint framework, and I'm going to add a new web part. So let's call this second web part, and adding that one in, it will again start the process. Second web part, the VP and description, and adding a second web part does only take a few seconds because the solution is already there. But I'm gonna save some time. I'm not gonna do that right now still. But pretty cool functionality as well. And what's really cool around this one as well, I'm gonna actually take that one away so I can, yes. I'm gonna do cancel, there we go. So I'm going to do an F5, and what happens is that it actually starts the solution in the same way as you would be doing culp serve within the command line. And there's my window which popped on another screen, so I'm going to drag and drop that one there. And there we go, it actually starts compiling and serving the structure from that particular folder. There we go, and it starts actually serving that, and in a second it's going to pop up the browser for me to see the current implementation of the web part. Oh, you are in a super fast mode. Webpack 3 seconds. Come on! I just want to show you the browser that it's actually popping up the browser. Let's see on which window that's going to actually come. Or did it actually open that one already in here? There we go. Now it's opening up the browser and a new tab. And we can actually see that custom web part, which I just created using the extension being hosted in here. Apparently my machine is having a slightly hard time. So let's say I'm requesting that one more time. There we go. There's my custom web part, and it's working obviously like it would be from a Yeoman template, because the whole extension is taking advantage of the existing Yeoman templates. It is not introducing any new templates. It is just calling the Yeoman using the Yeoman generator using the right templates on the background. So now, this is missing still some functionalities and missing some advantages, so it doesn't actually have a native debugging at this point. We can figure it out at some point, but the whole point is that this is getting there. It is an alpha release, and I think the initiative is really great. And you can already today start testing and providing an input and suggestions around this one as well. This doesn't mean that you need to do Visual Studio IDE. You can still do Visual Studio Code. I personally use Visual Studio Code, but there's a lot of people who would like to use Visual Studio IDE, which is understandable as well. So this will essentially enable that capability as well. So great work from Eric Jobs and Paul Schäferlin around this thinking. Good, but I think that's it from my side. So let's flip. Do we want to flip directly to next demo, Patrick?
Yeah,
and I can actually quickly run through
the. You're there and ready to go. If you just want to, you should be a presenter. If you want to take over and
Absolutely.
Show us what you got.
Yeah, doing that right now. Just tell me when you guys can see the screen.
Yep, not yet.
I got it on my end, and I'm apparently in the middle of nowhere.
Yes, you are. Awesome. So I'd like to show you today something we've been experimenting at Valo in the last couple of weeks and months. So you got currently a plain SharePoint screen. I want to show you what we did. So we're actually migrating all of our Valo Internet solution from a classic experience to the modern experience using the modern tool set. So we're going all the way to SharePoint framework, and one of the framework we're using the most is Riot.js. One of the reasons why we're using Riot.js is because it is super simple to use. It is very, very web component based, so it's fun for everyone to put in a page. It's easy in the classic experiences, but we wanted to get that into the SharePoint framework. Evidently, there is no SharePoint framework implementation for Riot, so I've been working with the team for the last couple of weeks to make that happen and to have some kind of a default Riot.js web part that can be leveraged for multiple web parts. So that's what I want to show you today. I just want to show you what we will be covering. So I created a very, very simple list viewer. That list viewer will be just a list viewer. So you select a list and then you see the content of that list. You just select that. And here you see we don't have anything selected here. You edit, you select documents, and then you see the content of that list. So very, very, very simple solution that I want to show you, but I especially want to show you all the fundamentals, how is that built in the framework. It's all available on GitHub, so if you want to take a look at it, it's all here. So github.com/SPFx Riot list. So all the code and documentation is absolutely all there. So now to the code. I will skip the part where we actually create a SharePoint framework project. Just do a yo SharePoint, you select no JavaScript framework, and then you add to that file. You add to that package, that JSON file, where you will need to add actually only two different packages, one which is Riot and one which is the Riot TypeScript implementation of Riot. So you'll be able to write in TypeScript and have all the types available right in your web part. For my use case, I also use the Office UI Fabric core, the UI Fabric JS, the client custom fields, and the awesome SPPNPGS library for access to SharePoint. And you also need to go into your tsconfig.json and add that experimental decorators to true, because this is how we will instruct our web parts on which templates should be used. So for me, Riot is a lot like a match made in heaven between handlebar, so very, very simple way of templating your code and templating your views, and React in terms of component, in terms of what you're doing, in terms of simple bundle component that can be reused in multiple other components. So this is exactly how we use Riot. So first thing you need to do, or first thing you need to understand, is that you will have your basic list viewer web part that is here. that will extend a web part called Riot client-side web part, and I'll come back to that one right after. But that's pretty much the only thing you're doing in that class. That class is only implementing some backend logic that exists in another class that will do everything for you. So in terms of logic, you don't have a lot to do, and that Riot client-side web part class is a very simple one. So it's more of an abstract of some tags and some web part options and root component type that will in fact do the rendering for you and the mounting of that web part. So you will just say, this is the tag that I want to register on my page right here, and this is how I want to mount my object. So this is how you just say to Riot, hey, by the way, here's my DOM element. So that is being passed by the Sharepoint framework. Here's the tag that I want to mount, and here's the web part options. And then Riot will take care of bundling everything together, making sure that your JavaScript file is glued to your template and to your models and to everything you need. And there you go, you're good to go. So for example, in my list viewer web part, I'm using one tag, which is called the list viewer. And my root component type is that list viewer. So let's see what's in that list viewer class. So I have here my list viewer. It is very, very similar to, if you ever done some Angular stuff in Angular 2, it is also some kind of similar in terms of how you would separate your code and all of that. So for example, here I have a template that is my HTML. I'll come back to that in a second. And I have here a bunch of objects. So I have a list ID, my styles, a list title, a bunch of items, which are my items that will be brought from SharePoint, is loading. And then I just need to specify in my constructor some of those different elements, different options. And then the only thing I need to do is once my component is actually mounted, once the riot.mount happened, and that now I'm ready to run code, I can use the async, the await async, so in JavaScript, and I just need to init my web part. I'm checking if there's a list ID. If there's a list ID, I just go and I actually use PNP.js to get those list elements and item elements right here, and I can automatically map them to my business objects. My business objects are actually very, very simple. Those are my very simple business object. By the way, Patrick, on that is absolutely awesome. I can easily see that happening in all of my projects currently. So very, very happy to see that in the framework. And now I lost my file. And then I just load in here. This is one of the key of the Riot.js. You need to instruct that, okay, all of the components and subcomponents, please reload yourselves. And then it's just going to instruct, okay, everyone just redraw yourself because something changed. In that case, because we're using AJAX calls, we need to do the update by ourselves. If it was just JavaScript calls, Riot is also able to understand the context of your object, of your component, and then automatically update that. And then what's in that component? So you can see here, I have a component. So here I have my tag. That is a custom tag that Riot will understand and use as a mount point for everything. And then I have here a very simple placeholder, which is pretty much the basic one that exists when you create a new SharePoint framework web part. Nothing very fancy in here. I'm using the styles from Office UI Fabric. Put a title, and this is where Riot.js comes into play. And this is where I think it really looks similar to what Angular or what Handlebar is doing in terms of templating. So here you have, for example, the list. So if I have a list, then I'd like to display that div. If I don't have a list, please display this one. And this is where everything happens. This is where I can have some UI logic living in my templates, and I can have some JavaScript and backend logic living in my TypeScript files. And then I can also embed or nest multiple components. So for example, here I have an Office UI Fabric table, which is a custom component I built on top of the Office UI Fabric that I can send some parameters. I can send are you loading? here's the bunch of items I want you to render. So I keep that Office UI Fabric table very, very specific. There's no logic in there, it just displays stuff. Here are the styles I want you to use, and I'll come back to this one. And I want it to be displayed only if there is a list. So meaning that if there's no list selected, I don't want to display an empty table. I will just display that entire component based on the existence of list. Then that table file, for example, if I'm going right here, it's actually nothing. There's nothing in there. There's one subcomponent type, which is a spinner. So I'm using also an Office UI Fabric spinner to show that I am currently loading stuff, but it's mainly an HTML file. And this is where I can say, okay, I have my component table, what are the titles, what are different columns, and then I can play with that. So everything that is being brought by my parent component is being pushed to my subcomponent, and everything can work with that. Something you need to note here, to make sure that all your web parts are actually working like independently of the framework they're using in terms of UI, you cannot just use MS Stable as your class. You need to use the styles version, so the modular version of your styles that is built automatically by the SharePoint framework. So when you have a module CSS file, it can import stuff, but automatically it creates a TypeScript file, which is this one, which adds some kind of a short hash or short grid in the end that will allow me to be able to use those styles, because those are the ones that are mounted in my Webpack right here. And this is how it actually works. And here I can do my stuff, and I can embed more and more of my components. So here, for example, I have an Office UI Fabric spinner. What's my label? I want to load. I want to pass in my style. So you can also leverage the same kind of styling that is used over there. And I can do some logic. If I'm loading, I want to show the spinner. If I'm not loading, but I don't have any items, I want to show no record found. But if not, I'll just push in all my items to be shown directly in my screen, in my list. So that's why when if I delete that file and I just add a new list viewer, I don't have any list, so I'm not showing anything. Then I select my documents. I can see a price list, an important document, a super document, because I have those documents. But if I'm changing, for example, to form templates, you will see the loader. Actually, the loader is not working now, but anyway. You will see that, and you will see that it says no record found when you have nothing in there or whatever. So that is very, very simple SharePoint framework logic. There's no magic happening in there. But the magic is really on the actual web part and on the actual component. So for example, if I'm going here, keep in mind that I'm actually using that decorator right here, Riot the template. You can put it here directly, your string, or your template literals. Thanks, EC, for correcting me on that earlier. So here you can have your template right here. So I love to keep those two things very separate, just because it's easier for me. So you can require your file as a string, and then it's going to download or package that list viewer HTML file from that file here. It's going to embed it, and in the end, it's going to actually create what Riot is expecting, which is just a big mess of JavaScript that is used to render our different components. So the basics of all of that is really, you have a web part. That web part needs to iterate from that Riot.js client-side web part. And automatically that Riot will do the mounting that you have to do in Riot, which is the following. So it will do that. And this is where all the magic actually happens. It is very similar to how the prototype of Angular 2 or Angular 4 SPFx web part is actually working. Just in that it's so much simpler and so much lighter. For example, we're talking about 9 kilobytes of size for Riot. If we compare that to, for example, to React, which is like 49 kilobytes, and just don't compare that to Angular, because I think we get into the megabytes. So it's a very, very lightweight, but it gets the job done super, super, super quickly. So I see that, especially for me that prefer to write my UI logic in HTML, because I come from a very deep Angular background. I way prefer to have that kind of logic right here with my each and my ifs directly in my template than to have that in a component in React where I will mix and HTML and JavaScript. I'm not a big fan, even though I'm using it, I'm not a big fan of React, so I prefer to go that kind of approach. And this is how we can make that happen very, very, very easily. And this is pretty much it. It's all available. It's on GitHub. I'll try to connect with guys at PNP to see if there's any value in building that in the samples. It's all there, and it works very well. And we bet on that for our couple of next components that we do at Valo. We also already started to do that kind of migration, and it works very, very well. It's super, super, super quick. If you want, there's also a router available, so you can have single-page applications that is built with Riot.js that can also be very, very easily embedded in a SharePoint framework web part. So anything you want to do with that kind of mechanism work, and that is pretty much it. That's what I wanted to show, Patrick.
Awesome, very cool stuff. Like I said at the top, I have not ever really used much Riot, but it looks very small and clean, and I think that's really cool. So I think a sample for this would be very valuable for folks in the community to see. Just another way to work with SharePoint Framework. Again, trying to support as many frameworks as possible. You're about to stop the current presentation. One of these days, I'm going to learn how to use Skype.
Thanks, guys.
Yes, thank you very much. So jumping back, great demo. So we did demo. So we got a good 15 or so minutes for open discussion. If folks have questions, I know we've had a good conversation going on Untitled.js here in the IM window. But this is the part of the call where if you have questions or comments, you want to come off mute, you're welcome to do that, or typing there in the IM window is also great. Looks like everything got pretty much answered. Any headway with Gov support? Vesa, do you have any updates on that? I mean, as far as I know, we don't know any dates, as I said on the last call. I don't know if Vesa's got any dates as well, but...
No, and let's be clear on this one. We're wrong people to answer on this one. So I'm working in a team who's responsible of creating the SharePoint framework. I have no idea who's even the people behind of the government farm support. So the right way to maybe find the right people would be that if you have a governmental customer or you're working directly with the Microsoft in the governmental side, is connect those people who are providing that service. Unfortunately, we in the engineering, in the actual engineering, not in the service engineering, in the actual engineering, we don't even know who's managing these forms. So I don't know if the people even responsible of the governmental service are aware of the demand for SharePoint framework. That's the problem. So if I would encourage people to use those channels which they have for Microsoft people using that route.
You guys have an answer on this issue?
Snap Chrome. No. I have no idea. Okay.
No, I guess for this call, no, we don't have an answer. Just because I don't really do a lot of the SharePoint framework issues. Has someone created an issue for this in the issues list? If not, that would be a good first step. Just to...
Well, it seems to be an out-of-the-box issue, out-of-the-box baked issue in Office 365, so it's nothing related on SP, BNP, or SharePoint framework necessarily. So.
Oh, and yeah, AC, definitely reach out if you want to do a presentation. Let us know, and that goes for everybody as well. If you want to do demo something, present some of your work, I would love to have you on the call. Love to give you that time. Cool. Well, in that case, I'm going to say I don't see any other questions, so we can go ahead and close up for this week. Thank you, everybody, as always, for joining the call. Thank you, Vesa and Seb, for the great demos. Really cool stuff. I don't know, I always learn something when I see the demos, and I hope everybody else does as well. Our next meeting is going to be May 11th. Already talking about May. This year is just flying by, at least for me.
Which is, by the way, overlapping with Build. So, for those who are in Build, though. But...
Is it?
Yes, it is overlapping with Build. But that's fine. That's fine. It's not like everybody got tickets to Build, because
yeah, I don't have
and they went really fast again this year. So
next meeting will be May 11th, and if you are at Build, we will have, of course, the recording posted, and we'll get this recording posted hopefully later today or early tomorrow. So everybody have a great week, great weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thanks all.
Bye-bye.